I'll never forget the patient who wouldn't sleep. Room 314, a quiet corner of the ICU, where the machines beeped and whirred in the darkness. It was 2 a.m., and I'd been checking on him every hour, but he just wouldn't settle. His vitals were stable, but his eyes were always open watching me. The nurse's station was just down the hall, but I felt isolated, alone with this patient who seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. I'd worked the night shift for years, but there was something about this patient that unnerved me. He was a John Doe, brought in after a hit-and-run accident. No ID, no family, just a stranger in a hospital bed. I'd grown accustomed to the sounds of the ICU, the beeping machines, the soft murmurs of the patients, but this patient's silence was oppressive. He didn't speak, didn't react, just lay there with those piercing eyes. I'd catch him staring at me, and I'd feel a shiver run down my spine. One night I decided to review his chart, see if there was anything that might explain his strange behavior. That's when I saw it, a notation from the previous nurse, mentioning that the patient had been found with a small piece of paper in his pocket. The paper had a single phrase, "I'm still here." I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. What did it mean? And who wrote it? As the night wore on, I found myself glancing at the patient more and more often. He was always watching, his eyes fixed on me. I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. The machines beeped and whirred, but it was the silence that was deafening. I knew I had to get out of there, to take a break and clear my head. But as I turned to leave, I heard a faint whisper. "I'm still here." I spun around, but the patient was still lying in bed, his eyes closed. Or so I thought. My heart racing, I approached the bedside, my eyes locked on the patient. His chest rose and fell with each breath, but his eyes seemed to be watching me even when they were closed. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I realized that I was not alone. Someone, or something, was with me in the room. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. Who or what was speaking to me? I didn't dare look around, didn't dare breathe. The machines seemed to fade into the background as I stood there, frozen in terror. And then the patient's eyes snapped open. He looked at me and I felt my soul shiver. "I'm still here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. But it was his eyes that haunted me, black as coal, empty as the night. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as the night wore on, the feeling only grew stronger. I started to notice strange things. The patient's IV pole would be moved. His blankets would be pulled up to his chest, and his eyes would be watching me with an unnerving intensity. I knew I had to talk to someone about this, but who would believe me? The other nurses would just tell me I was tired, that I needed to take a break. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I felt. I was being watched, and I was being haunted. As the night shift came to an end, I breathed a sigh of relief. I was finally going to be able to go home, to get out of that oppressive atmosphere. But as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The patient was sitting up in bed, his eyes fixed on me. And on his chest, in letters that seemed to be written in blood, was a single phrase, "I'm still here." I ran out of there, didn't stop until I was out of the ICU, out of the hospital. I never went back, never finished my shift. Some say I'm still haunted by those eyes, by the memory of that voice whispering in the darkness. Others say I'm just a nurse who couldn't handle the stress. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. And I'll never forget the patient who wouldn't sleep. The hospital tried to get me to come back to finish my shift and continue working. But I knew that I couldn't go back to that place, not after what I had experienced. I'd seen things that couldn't be explained, heard whispers in the darkness, and I knew that I'd never be the same again. Years have passed since that night, but the memory of those eyes still haunts me. I'll never forget the feeling of being watched, of being trapped in a living nightmare. And